are the largest heating and air conditioning company in Los Angeles. We're an 81-year-old business.
What are the first things that you look to change when you do acquire a business?
How long do you want the owner to stay?
What is it like competing in one of the most populated cities in America?
Somebody once said, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. We have 20 million people within 2 hours of where I'm sitting right now.
What does that lead cost?
I have a very close friend who does 50 million. The lead from those folks, it costs him about 20 bucks. When I buy a lead from those folks, it costs me 200 bucks.
Is there a sweet spot that you've noticed?
It's tough to get started if you don't have access to people or capital. You've got to be able to have one or the other.
Hey guys, before we jump into today's episode, I wonder if you could do me a super quick favor. So most of the people that watch our videos are not actually subscribed to our YouTube channel. So if you can take 2 seconds, go down below, hit the like button, hit subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me, to our team behind the scenes who put in an immense amount of effort to make these episodes what they are, and also to our guests who take a chunk out of their day to come on here, talk with me, and share their knowledge, stories, experience, and game with you guys in an effort to make you and your businesses more successful as well. Also, for those of you guys that are home service business owners and you're struggling with the marketing and lead generation department in your business and you feel like that's something that's holding you back from growing to the levels that you want to, that is the problem that we solve at TradeOps Consulting. So we have a full suite of marketing services, everything from A to Z, whether it be website design, SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, you name it, we do it. We also build automations and systems that help you guys make the most out of your marketing as well. At the moment, about 80% of our business comes from word of mouth referrals. That is business owners and contractors just like you telling their friends and other business owners about the great experience that they had with us. And so that is the reputation that we have spent 6 years building here doing marketing for the trades. If you guys need help with stuff like that, click the first link in the description below. Book a call in with me. We'll take a look at your business, peek under the hood, see what's going on. If there's anything that we can do to help you guys fix it, we can lay out a path for what that would look like, taking our systems and putting them into your business. So if that's something you're interested in, book a call with the first link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get to it. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the TradeOps Radio podcast. Today, I'm joined by our guest, Lawrence Castillo. Lawrence, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how we got here.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm sort of an accidental tourist in heating and air conditioning. It wasn't what I went to school for. I didn't go to a trade school. I didn't grow up on the tools. I'm just somebody who stumbled into it. And it's now 25 years later, right? And I'm really grateful to the industry. I'm grateful for the people that I've met along the way. I've had a lot of really great mentors. I've had a lot of really great people work for me. And, so I'm lucky. And I try to, do stuff like this to give back because, I was once young in this industry and didn't know a lot, and people lent their time and their resources to me. So I try to do that. I'm the operating partner of a portfolio of companies in Southern California. And the platform company is Brody Pennell in Los Angeles. We are the largest heating and air conditioning company in Los Angeles proper. We're an 81-year-old business that has a reputation in this town that, it's funny, I see some of these old businesses. I live very close to a place called Randy's Donuts here in Los Angeles. It's by the airport, and it's famous because it has a big donut on the roof. And drove by there the other day and noticed that they were incorporated in 1952. And we're older than them, right? In-N-Out Burger, we're older than them. We're older than a lot of the businesses that are part of the fabric of this city. So I would like to think that our business is part of the fabric of this city. Generations of customers, and people who keep coming back to us because we provide outstanding customer service. So that is my job every day, is to run our businesses, to make sure that we're giving great customer service, make sure that we're hiring great people, and make sure that we are delivering on the promises that we make, in that, we will go and take care of their needs and do it with a smile on our face and want to, have people want us to come back into their home. So that is what I do for a living. I just wrangle people and make sure we fix air conditioners. So
what is it like competing in one of, the most populated cities in America? I mean, when I think of places that could be great to start a business if you've got an edge or some sort of experience already, like the LAs, the New Yorks, the Miamis, the, Dallas, Fort Worth areas of the world, like a lot of competition, but also a lot of, potential customers as well. So what is it like for you guys? Obviously a little bit of a moat there from being in business for so long, but just in general, what is it like having to compete in Los Angeles?
it's a great question. And I don't think I've been asked that enough times to have ever formulated an answer on a podcast, but I can tell you this. This is a city full of bottom feeders, right? This is the city that consolidation didn't want to come to because the weather is mild, right? And it's hard to keep your people busy. And there are tens of thousands of unsophisticated contractors giving away jobs that we have to compete with every day. This isn't normal, right? I've seen heating and air conditioning on a normal scale, and because we have 20 million people within 2 hours of where I'm sitting right now, it's not normal. And so we're competing against Chuck in the truck all the time. And we are competing against, Mother Nature because there's no weather for us, right? Today in our businesses, we had a hard time making the phone ring. And that is because it is 70 degrees outside right now. It's beautiful. And at 70 degrees, not a lot of people are using their air conditioning in West Los Angeles, and nobody's using their heating. So there's no demand. So you have to, the level of sophistication for a contractor to survive 8 years, let alone 81 years, you have to know what you're doing, right? There's a reason that this city is littered with, small contractors and folks that haven't, been able to grow the business. So it's tough. It's tough to make it in Los Angeles. And, as somebody once said, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I would like to think that we have to be better here, that my technicians have to give a greater level of customer service, that they have to be better at their tune-up. They have to go into a house and provide better customer service because it's not 95 degrees outside. They don't get to come inside and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the amp draw on this air conditioner, it is through the roof. Your lights are dimming when you turn it on. Guess what? They're not turning it on, right? We have to be better. We have to, just be at a different level than guys in cities where there's weather. So it's difficult in this marketplace. But this is the hand I was dealt, right? I didn't get to wake up in Boston and deal with heating breakdowns, or didn't wake up in Phoenix this morning with all kinds of cooling breakdowns. I woke up here where the weather is beautiful and the sun is shining and no one's using their systems. So it is what it is.
What does that do for your guys, like lead costs or some of like your marketing numbers and stuff like that? Because I would imagine it's difficult where it's like you guys probably have, I mean, for a lot of different reasons. One, the slightly lack of demand. Two, the amount of competition, people that are also probably running ads as well or doing marketing, advertising, stuff like that. So you've got lower demand, more competition, more supply basically. And, on top of that, the cost of living and all these other things in LA, from what I have seen and heard, is like kind of up there, right? And then on top of that, you've got the Chuck in a truck who's competing on price. So it's like he's keeping the, I guess, market rate of what the consumer has exposure to for price. Like they might get a quote that's way, off base from what you guys or some of the other more, established operations are running. So like, how do you balance all that? What does that look like?
Well, just like you might imagine, when I drive and get gas today, I'm going to be paying $6.75 a gallon. That's what we pay here today, right? So you might imagine that the leads that I'm buying to keep my guys busy are quite expensive as well, right? And they are. I have a very close friend who has an air conditioning company in Fresno that does 50 million. And there's one lead aggregator that we were talking about recently. And when he buys a lead from those folks, it costs him about 20 bucks. When I buy a lead from those folks, it costs me 200 bucks. So when you think about rolling, 150 vehicles and trying to make sure you got 3 calls every day for those people, and even when you have a great base of customers and we're outbounding to those customers to make sure that, we've got enough calls, even with those folks, even with our own customers, it's tough to fill the board because, they don't want to get the work done right now because they don't feel there's a sense of urgency with the weather, right? Hey, we want to get your air conditioning tune-up done. Hey, and they tell us we're not using the air conditioning. Give us another month. Come out in a month when we start to use it. So either I buy expensive leads or we outbound to our own customers who might not even want us right now. Like, it's tough. And we're scraping and scratching and clawing to try to figure out every day how to make the phone ring enough. There are really smart people in this industry that work in different markets. And there's a couple of young guys that I can think of in middle America who are just great at what they do. But those folks, they've got some weather, right? And they might have a different vertical or two other than what we do, right? They're probably doing plumbing and siding and roofing or whatever. But that's the battle. The battle in Los Angeles every day is to get up and make sure that your installers are working. And the only way to do that is to make sure you have enough service calls on the board and maintenance calls. So it's a fight. It's a fight. And but we're here fighting that good fight every day. And I think that our call center, anybody that I've shown our call center says that it blows whatever they have away, right? I've got an incredible outbounding team. I've got a lot of folks here in operations that are a part of that. So I would like to think that, knowing that we have to be better, I think we're better. I think that, have brought a lot of people through this operation to see it. And the comments are always the same. Like your call center and dispatch situation is, the best I've ever seen. So that helps, right? We have good people, good processes, and we work hard to make sure we've got the calls.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something like, as a business, you're forced to compete at the level that the other people around you are. And so whether the call center or the sales process or all of those things where, like, obviously it's something that every business would strive to have, but when it's born out of necessity, like, you have to have those things dialed in order to even stay afloat, let alone be competitive or, kind of dominate your area. It's a totally different, ball game and approach. What are some of the things with your dispatch, CSRs, sales process, the call center? What are some of the things that you guys think you do differently that would set you apart? Or, like, what are the things that when another business owner comes and you kind of give them the tour or give them the walkthrough of that system, what are the things that stand out to them? Like, damn, I'm not doing that. Why am I not? Why did I never think about it like that? Or that's a good trick. I should definitely, implement that for myself. What are those, like, the little things?
It's funny. There's a group that owns about 35 businesses, private equity, and they came through our business 6 months ago. And he walked through our call center and dispatch and he said, I want to buy your business just for what you have here. He says, we have 35 locations and we don't have anything like this. And that's a great compliment. And it's a great compliment to the people in operations that I have running all of that. But I think that, we've figured out through a lot of trial and error how to make it a great customer service experience. There's so much AI stuff and there's all these different plugins. You're sending emails and text message campaigns and you're outbounding live and you're outbounding through AI and you've got a rehash follow up through AI there's just all this stuff that you can be doing. And, I have a great team here that has orchestrated an incredible effort so that, we are not leaving any stone unturned, right? We are touching our clients the right amount. If there's a cancellation on a booking, there's a certain amount of times that we're going to try them again in order to get that call back on the board. If like it's all math. Understand that about these businesses. For you to be successful, for you to scale, for you to be in a city like this where there's no weather, unless you can really do great math, you're not going to be a success, right? And for us, it's the backwards math. It's being able to say, okay, we have this many people, we need this many calls, we need to, those calls will provide this much revenue. For us to be able to go into battle every day and to walk down that path and know that confidently that we're going to be able to make it happen, you have to do a lot of really great math. So I've got some good mathematicians over there that do that for us. But I think that, we're a process-driven company. We're very organized, and everything that we do is written down. I spent years of my life working, running a business called Service Champions here in Orange County. And I remember that the owner of the business, his name was Leland Smith, he would always tell me that if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And, I always took that to heart, and I carried that with me. And so we've written a lot of processes. There's a lot of organizational structure to these businesses. And, without that, there's not really much accountability. And we're very big on accountability here, right? I had 4 new employees come into my office a little bit earlier today. They introduced me to them, and I wished them well. All we can do is provide them an opportunity, and what they choose to do with it is up to them. But we have the processes in place for someone to be a success. Now, whether they can come to work every day or whether they have a stomachache every Friday and they take off, I can't control that, right? But we do a really good job of setting up people for success here, especially in our call center and dispatch.
Is there any unique mechanism that you can share, or even if it's one step out of the chain of processes where, like you said, it's all about the math and the numbers and the, total number of dials, total number of pickups, total amount of bookings, conversion of those is there one step in that chain where you guys are we know that our number in this thing is top tier because of this one thing that we do? And if so, can you think of one or maybe share it as well?
I think that from an analytics and reporting standpoint, we knew a few years ago that we didn't have the reporting that we needed to be a success. Because if you're going to be in charge of a really large group of people that are going to be responsible to fill your board every day, you need to know every day, all day, what things look like for the rest of today, for tomorrow. And I don't think we were doing a good job of that. We're probably data overload at this point, right? We have the analytics are crazy here, but it really helps us to be aware. Like right now, I can walk in there and I know within 10 seconds where we stand for tomorrow. But they're not worried about tomorrow. They're worried about tonight, right? They're worried about, you've got trucks combing all over West Los Angeles, and you don't want anybody sitting on the side of the road waiting for a call, right? You want them to be in front of customers generating revenue. So I think that we've done a really good job of just making sure everyone has access to the analytics and that the numbers are pulled frequently and put in front of everybody all the time, so that we, if that's the scoreboard, right? If we're short, we got to make it happen. So I think that the analytics is probably something that we have that is a competitive advantage over some of the other companies in Los Angeles.
Right on. I want to circle back. I know you said that there was a lead aggregator or vendor that you said, cost per lead is around $200. Do you know what platforms specifically or what channels they're getting that, or is it blended multiple?
No, that's for one aggregator. Let me tell you what. Once again, trial and error. We went ahead and we went with a different marketing vendor in the last couple of years. And the solution for them, if we were short of calls, was to have 25 lead aggregators. And to be buying these expensive leads. And this is incredible, but we got rid of all the lead aggregators. We terminated that relationship. We got rid of all the lead aggregators, and guess what? It didn't even impact our call volume. Like, we were just handing money out the window for calls that we were just, paying a fortune for, that weren't even closing. We just decided, hey, let's just cut all that out. Let's work harder on our existing customer base. This is an 81-year-old business, right? There's lots of people we've served over those 81 years. Let's get rid of the call acquisition cost, right? The customer acquisition cost. And instead of paying $250 for a lead, let's just work what we have and make it happen that way. And that was an epiphany, right? And I know that there are marketing partners out there, up and down the street, who will probably tell you that you need more lead aggregators. You don't need more lead aggregators, right? It's just those expensive calls. Measure it very carefully, because you will find out that it's not worth, the bang for the buck is not worth it.
Yeah, it honestly kind of surprised me. I mean, we do marketing consulting stuff as well, and I know what the numbers are across different platforms, whether it be Facebook, Google, SEO, kind of the blend of all of them. So that's why I was asking specifically if like what platform that particular vendor was getting, a $200 cost per lead in Los Angeles is on, because that's pretty interesting to me. Those numbers are good.
All it is it's the reselling of leads, right?
Yeah.
That is one that just happens to, and I'll tell you when we're done with this, but I'll tell you who they are. But it's an expensive call, and we don't need it, right? Like, if we're desperately short of calls, we can buy from a few aggregators. That's fine. But it's certainly not a big part of what we do at all. I mean, I like to do without it. I think that if we work hard and look at the existing people in our database, I'd rather, mine that gold instead of pay somebody else for something that ends up being garbage most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically when we're doing sort of like an audit or something like that, one of the first places we look at is the CRM and where they're keeping their customer data, how many people are in that database. And a lot of times it's like, we're obviously just got paid. We're on the hook for a quick win. So a database reactivation is usually one of the first things that we can get set up and done pretty quickly. And it's like, a lot of these guys have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in their database, and they don't utilize it, don't know how to activate it, don't know how to reach out to those people. And even if it's just a text or an email blast, that's like pretty rudimentary. It's not anything crazy or complicated. The outbound dialing and stuff like that is like, okay, we need people and a process to get that kind of machine rolling. So for the guys that are, the chuck and a trucks or 2 or 3 man operation, that's a little, the manpower isn't there to get something like that set up. But, we can do the text and the email thing pretty efficiently. And even that gets results that oftentimes is pretty surprising for them, where it's like, yeah, dude, the 1,000 people or whatever that's in the CRM, even if they're old leads that you never followed up with, didn't contact you back, or ghosted you after an estimate, whatever, even some of those are incredibly valuable at some point. So keeping track of all of that and utilizing all of that, like, we live in a data-driven world right now. So like, the more phone numbers, emails, and addresses that you have, that is one of the more valuable pieces of your business. Forget about the trucks, forget about, maybe even the techs. I hate to say it, but anybody can go to school and get a license, but if you own the data, that's huge. That's the dollars right there.
We, we have a heat map, right, of where our revenue comes from. And, over the years, I've tested going outside of, the bounds of our coverage area. And it's always the same result, right? I have these big grandiose plans of, moving further into the San Fernando Valley, where there isn't as much, name recognition of who we are. And, but I know those zip codes. I love those zip codes. I want to be up there. And it ends up always being a waste of money, right? And when all you really have to do is look at that heat map, look at where the existing revenue comes from, look at where your brand identity really is. And that's, if you concentrate your efforts there, you will more than likely succeed. So
100%. I, on the data and numbers note, I mean, for you guys, I'd imagine it's incredibly important. And like you said, you're a math guy, so I'm sure you guys have it, incredibly, narrowed down to very, very specific kind of granular numbers when it comes to your overhead or job costing and stuff like that. I mean, for the average guy, average contractor out there, if they went from paying $4 to $6.45 or whatever crazy number you said earlier you're paying for gas, like within a week or a month or even overnight, that change in their overhead, if they, are not 100% certain what their numbers are, like that could sink a lot of these guys and they don't even know it, which is a pretty scary thing. A lot of times take a peek under the hood, break it down for them as far as like, hey, this is how much you're actually spending every day just to run your business, not acquiring new customers, not hiring people, not getting new trucks, not growing, just like to exist with the lights on and the shop is open. Like this is what it costs you per day. How granular do you guys get with those numbers for your business? And then also, what's the one number or one expense that you think not enough people know about or pay attention to, that it's like that is the hidden cost that, like, if you're not calculating this, your pricing is probably could use a rework.
the labor, your labor is what's going to decide whether you are profitable or not, right?
Hmm.
Um, for me, such a big part of this job is having a great handle on our P&L and understanding the difference between being profitable and not. And, if you can reduce your equipment and your materials to X percentage of revenue, and if you can hold your marketing expense to X percentage of revenue, the labor is the variable, right? Because the labor will end up killing you. If you're not managing your overtime, it'll kill you. If you're not managing your projects and your 2-day projects are becoming 3 and 4 days and you didn't sell it for that, it's going to kill you. And it's the labor. The labor is what will certainly dictate the success or failure of a business like this. So we've, we grew quickly here, and, I had 300 plus employees a couple of years ago, and the economic climate has changed. The cost of equipment changed, the cost of fuel changed, the cost of labor has changed. And you really have to just be able to pivot and make sure that you can make the changes to make sure that you are still a viable entity and that you can be around for 81 years. And the smart operators are pivoting with it. We spoke a little bit earlier about consolidation, and the consolidators that have come into Southern California, Service Champions, Apex, the Any Hour Group, the Sear Group, they've consolidated their holdings here. Some of these groups have come in here and bought 5 businesses, and now they're operating 1 or 2, right? Because they've realized, oh, there's a reason that the consolidators haven't come into Southern California for the last 12 years. It's very difficult to operate. Lead cost is expensive, fuel costs, windshield time, labor, workers' compensation. It is so expensive to operate here, right? And they're learning a very expensive lesson. And so I think that, we've seen the consolidators consolidating over the last year, right? They were spending money over the last 3 or 4 years buying businesses, and they have 5 or 6 different locations, and then you turn your head and there's one left, and they've closed all the other brands. It's happening. Southern California is really difficult to operate in, and you've got to really be smart. So, we welcome the competition, and we're seeing them fall by the wayside, and we're seeing the mistakes that they've made. And I knew something like this would happen when all these businesses were being snapped up. People that aren't from here, that haven't operated here, they come in here and fail. And I've seen it happen. I've been a part of an effort like that a long time ago. So anyway, it's we're just here with our head down, trying to do what we do and watching all the madness around us,
Yeah. When we talked about the outbound dialing and like the call center setup, it sounded like you were kind of advocating for the human element and mentioned that like there's some AI parts of the process perhaps, but you guys are process heavy, which I would assume means that like there's people involved there. Um, do you think there's any efficacy in the AI dialers or automated like call center stuff, or do you still think that that's a valuable position to have a human in that seat for now, at least?
And that's a good question. I think that AI has made a huge impact in our industry, and of course, in the field, that it's always going to be the relationship, right? Your technicians are going to go out there, your salespeople are going to go out there, and there have been organizations or people who, no, we're just going to go ahead and sell equipment over the internet. We're going to get your free quote. We're just going to ship it out there to your front door, and all of that kind of stuff. That's not the way people in Los Angeles buy stuff. They just don't. Um, but I can tell you that from an inside staff perspective, it's changed our business. Um, we've gone through a lot with AI over the last 2+ years, and we've gotten to a really comfortable place. You're balancing the AI versus your in-house staff, and then I have some overseas staff as well. And so you have all of that to balance, and you have to have the right amount of everybody in order to make this work. But I can tell you that I think we're at a really good place with that. When this whole thing started and we had AI answering the phone, my customers were so unhappy. They were really upset. The experience was awful. And 2 years later, and we've changed a lot of the people that we deal with, but I can tell you that I never hear a complaint from a customer about our AI agents. And I think they've gotten so good that people just, they have a hard time knowing the difference anymore. And it's quite efficient. So it's made a big difference for us. I'm really pleased with where we're at with that. But certainly your manpower will be adjusted over the next few years, at least your inside staff, because some of these jobs will be able to be done, with AI, and or at least parts of the jobs. Just my social media coordinator, was talking to him a few days ago, and he spends a lot of time going out in the field, riding along with technicians, going to job sites, chronicling jobs. He's got the drone, he's got cameras on, he's just got the whole thing. And it's great because he makes great branded material for us. But then I'm also looking at all this AI generated stuff, and it can be just as compelling. And guess what? I don't even need him to do that, right? So, it's some of these jobs are just going to change, and we may be able to outsource some stuff, and we may have less bodies in the seats. But for right now, I feel good with where we're at. But 6 months from now, check back with me, because our manpower count might have changed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What are the biggest use cases that you guys have AI plugged in for right now?
So we have one solution for our whole call center, and that partner, they've changed our business, and I'm really grateful for them. I use them for another of our businesses, and um, I I think that it's really like the stuff that we used to have to do, call dispositioning, right? You have to have somebody listen to the calls and flag it. Hey, this was an opportunity, or this was the, like, it's just done automatically now, right? Grading your CSRs, it's all done by AI now. There's just so much of it that we've been able to save ourselves the time and the effort. Call dispositioning 2 years ago, it was just the bane of my existence, right? We couldn't get a true call booking number because we thought that the call center agents were excusing calls on their own, right? And what ended up happening was your booking percentage is skewed. So then we put somebody else in charge of it, and they weren't able to get through all the calls. But now it's automated, it's automatic, and it's true. It's a true number. So it's helped our business, and I think AI will continue to help businesses like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned the social media thing. We do some of that stuff as well. Whether it be organic posting on Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that, or running the paid ads side of both of those platforms as well. And what we've noticed is there's some things that can be completely generated by AI alone, just with good prompting. But then there's other situations where it's incredibly helpful to have sort of a starting point. So like if you have your social media guy who's got high quality drone footage, or like inside the house footage, or like documentation of the guys on the trucks, and just giving the AI a starting point of like, hey, this is like what it actually looks like, taking that and then amplifying it, or, taking the one drone shot and turning it into 10 is a pretty good use for some of the AI stuff. So I don't think that, again, maybe in 6 months, the answer to this question for me would be different too. But for right now, it's like, it helps us a lot to have even just one or two starting points as far as video and image. And I mean, something that we run into a lot is like owner operators that are still kind of involved in the day-to-day operations, or don't want to be on camera, don't want to, be the sales and marketing, the poster boy of their business. So it's like, hey, dude, we just need you to sit down and record like 30 minutes of videos. We'll give you the scripts and everything after that. And once we have that template, we never need you to record a video again. You know what I mean? We can take them, clone it, do the scripting, and create the ads and copy and stuff like that for them. So a lot of times it's like, we just need a little bit to feed the engine. And then once it's going, it's like, okay, it's getting pretty good.
It's an amazing thing, right?
It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool.
The world is changing before our eyes. And, here in this town, I had a representative for a financing company come here from San Francisco last week. And she sat in my office here and just was commenting, she says, hey, I'm following your mayoral race. And, we live here, so didn't realize that so many people are following this, but we have a candidate here for mayor who the AI ads have just become such a huge thing. He's not generating them, but the people that follow him are generating them. And they've really people have taken notice, right? And I think he's changing the way that some of these political contests will be, over the next few years. This is sort of a groundbreaking case study in what to expect in the future. But, it's certainly changing everything that we do, and, we all have to make place for it. And, I've welcomed it here because I know it's making a big difference in our business.
Absolutely. As an owner operator, what are like some of the most important relationships that you can have? Whether that be within the business, within some of the different compartments of your business, or even outside of it. Kind of an open-ended question, but like first thing that comes to your mind.
It's fine. I think that when we bought these businesses, I think that it started with, this was a very small business that didn't produce a lot of revenue. And I really started with the brand story, right? I mean, walked in the door, and this was a 70 whatever year old business with not many reviews and beat up trucks and a clunky website. And that was the starting place. Nobody wants to do business with a company that doesn't have a great brand story. And we had a story, it just hadn't been told, right? And when you have a business with this kind of history and lineage, and when you're a part of the fabric of a city like this, you tell that story. You tell it, and you stand on the mountaintop and you shout it out. And once we started doing that, it started to change our fortunes. And now here we are a few years later, and 5,000 Google reviews, and, we're the most well-known company in the city. And I just think that you got to start with the brand story, right? So we started with that. And so I guess that's the answer to the question was, the most important relationships, the most important relationship is with your customers, right? And you're not going to have customers who can't find you on Google, who don't believe that you're a 5-star company, who don't understand that, you've been around for as long as you have and that you have clean trucks and a nice looking building and people who have been background checked and drug tested working for you. And all of this is important stuff. We needed to tell that story so that they wanted to do business with us. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of people in a building on Venice Boulevard, and they see our trucks in the freeway. No, that's not it. We are the best company in this city with the most reviews, with 81 years behind us, with the longest carrier dealership tag in the Western United States, with 7 times being voted as the best company in Los Angeles by the readers of the Los Angeles Times, blah, 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 blah. And you just can't keep that a secret. You got to tell everybody. And so we started doing that, so that the people could find us and would want to do business with us. And that's where we're at, on any given day. I can look at our service schedule and I can see the names of so many celebrities, and I can see that, and I never wonder, how did that person stumble across us? I know how they stumbled across us. They typed in broken air conditioner Los Angeles and we came up first, and they see the 81 years and 5,000 reviews and all the awards, and they choose us, right? That's what it is. And so, and those folks, and some of those folks have been coming to us for generations and generations. And some of them are just, Johnny come lately, right? But that's how they find us, right? And so we've always used that as a litmus test when we look at our service schedule. How many of those folks are on the schedule today, right? And there's always a ton of them, and they find us the same way as the guy down the street in the humble little house. He just Googled us, right? We're the same to everybody, right? We just have a great brand story, and we've worked hard to get it out there. So,
Do you ever do like testimonial videos with the celebrities or people with some kind of brand or, social media audience?
I've never asked. When it comes to those folks, I'm grateful that they call us, and you never want to be an imposition, right?
Yeah.
But my, 70% of my trucks are in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Pacific Palisades, Malibu, Santa Monica, Hollywood Hills. That's where they're at today. And that's every day for us. This is an 81-year-old company that started in Westwood, and this is our territory, right? Like, we're the company of choice. So, I try not to be an imposition and try not to ask anything of those folks, and just want to be a good service company to them. But we have a lot of really big fans when it comes to that group of people that, like, they'll always use us. They use us frequently. So we just try to be a good service company to them, and do a good job so that they'll tell their friends.
Yeah. I can see how the ask there could backfire depending on the personality, but also maybe for like some social media content or something like that could be interesting. I don't know.
There's a guy
depends a lot on the person.
There's a guy that that works for CBS, that we sold him a system a month ago, and he offered to do a testimonial, and so he's done that. But that was his own thing. We didn't ask for that, right? But anyway, sometimes they want to. But when you're used to having a camera in your face, all the time, sometimes you don't really want to do that. But our roster of clients is it's a large one, and I just, if we can just, like I said, do a great job for people, they'll keep coming back to us. Doesn't matter if they're Hollywood celebrity or just a hardworking folks that live right around the corner. We just want to serve all of them, and work hard to do that every day.
Right on. The story piece, How big of a factor is that if you were to say, look into buying a particular business? Is that one of the categories where you see, hey, there's an opportunity here? Like we can look at the numbers and, the financials and all of that stuff, and like we can work through what levers we could pull to improve those things. But if you see an opportunity like the one you had with the current company where it's like 80 years in business, there's a lot of lore, a lot of history here where it's like, how can we leverage that? Because that's something that's hard to put like a hard tangible return or a number or like track how well you're telling the story, right? Like you can't really measure that, but it is a big piece. Like at the end of the day, the storytelling like is marketing. How you present yourself, how customers perceive you is most of, the effort that goes into building a brand, doing some of your, your marketing and stuff like that. So is that something that you look at specifically when doing an acquisition, or is it kind of a bonus of like, if it's there, then we can definitely, it's another green flag in the deal, but is that something you would chase after solely uh, as an
No, I
opportunity
think
to work
I
with?
think that we've bought legacy businesses. We have one that's 63 years old. We have one that's 81. We have one that's 47. Um, and we've bought legacy businesses just because they were good purchases, right? They had good databases. They had a great online reputation, a good group of people working there. So I think we were naturally attracted to those businesses because of that. But we didn't go shopping for those kinds of businesses, right? We also bought one that was 8 years old, right? So it's just the right acquisition, will come to you whether it all makes sense. But it sure is nice when it comes with a nice, brand story and a company that has 60 years worth of pictures and all that goodwill built up. Like there's great currency to that, you know, currency that you can use throughout your marketing effort. And so, we've been blessed because of that. My location in San Diego, they're 47 years old, and we redid everything, right? Moved the building from its old crappy location. We rewrapped the trucks. We built a new website. We changed logo. We just did everything a little bit differently. And I think that was the catalyst for sending that business, on a different trajectory, right? The history was there, but the old ownership, they were tired. They hadn't put much, behind the brand. And all it took was freshening up the logo and we were off to the races. So I think that, you know, having a great logo and truck wrap was um, certainly a catalyst in San Diego for us. So, each of these is different, but I don't think we've ever gone in to buy a business just because of the age or history. Um, More so looking at it as, is this a good acquisition or good opportunity for us or not? So,
Gotcha. Are you a fan of the hot pink or like neon color branding truck wraps, like the really flashy, aggressive, like cartoon mascot kind of style where it's like, hey, we're gonna buy this thing, totally modernize it, and they kind of go a little crazy with it. I mean, it works. I see the appeal in it, but I'm curious, you know, your
I would,
position. I'm guessing you didn't do that with the 80-year-old
we
business.
didn't, but um, I would say this, I would say that, for a really long time, many of us in Western United States, we read about and wanted to be like Horizon Services on the East Coast, which they span many states, and they had orange trucks. And that was something that, here in Los Angeles, we didn't have, there weren't solid color, and they did that with a purpose, right? They knew that color would get noticed and there's not a lot of orange trucks on the road. And so, one company decided to do that, and it certainly became a thing for them, a calling card. And so, over the last 10, 12, 13 years, I think the color of your truck, the wrap on your truck has become a much bigger deal. And there are people out there that do a great job designing that stuff. Um, I think for a small contractor, that's not really that shouldn't be your first, the first money that you spend. Don't go out and spend a bunch of money on truck wraps and like start, start your business by working on the blocking and the tackling, right? Making the phone ring, delivering great customer service, because it doesn't matter if you have a white truck and you go out there and you deliver a great experience, they're going to want to come back and do business with you again, regardless of what your truck looks like, right? When you get to a point where you've got, additional working capital, then you can wrap your trucks and then start to build your brand. But at first you just need customers, and you pay $200 or $300 to make the phone ring, and you can't waste that opportunity. Like, those folks have to stay in your database. So use your money to hire good people and to train them well. And that'll go a long way toward getting to the point where you can wrap trucks.
100%. What does your guys' recruiting pipeline look like?
So, the very first hire that I made when we bought these businesses was to hire a recruiting director. Just because I knew that as the operator of the business, walking into a small business that had underperformed, my plate was full. Like, I was going to be busy working on all the other stuff in the business, and it wouldn't have left the time necessary to source and identify and interview candidates so that we could grow the business and scale it. So I hired a recruiting director. She worked 40 hours a week on that specific task, and she was very good at it. And it allowed us to all of a sudden, go from 34 employees when we bought it to 50 and then 60. And all of a sudden you've got 80 and 100 and 130, and you just continue to grow. But it never would have happened had I taken on that task when we first bought this business, because I would have never been able to prioritize it, right? I'm busy on the phone with technicians and in front of salespeople in a meeting in the mornings, and I'm sitting in the call center listening to how they're answering the calls, and I'm in the accounting department seeing the job costing. And when you're bogged down with that stuff, you're not interviewing people. So no matter how small the business is, somebody has to be working 40 hours a week on your recruiting effort. And if it's a very small business, maybe you're the operator, maybe your wife or your sister or somebody like that is helping with that task, but they're going to devote much more time to it. Here at Brody, additionally, we have our own school. So we're able to recruit people off the street. We go through a process that takes us about a month and a half to come up with a class, and people apply. We get 5,000 applications every cycle that we run the school, and we narrow it down to somewhere between 15 and 20 candidates. And they go through a 3-month process here where we teach them, whatever they need to know about heating and air conditioning. And they graduate from our school, and then there's more ride-alongs. And at some point we release them out into the field, into the public, out to the wolves, so that they can go out and do the work themselves. But recruiting is everything for a business like this, and we would have never been able to scale it had we not had an organized recruiting effort.
Out of those 15 to 20 people, how many end up working for you versus going and doing their own thing, or they get, picked off by another company or something like that?
Let's say you start with 15, and it's a 3-month process upstairs, 3-month process. And, after 1 month, one of them will drop out. So you're down to 14. And, before they graduate, another one will drop out. You're down to 13. And you graduate 13, and some of them go to installation, some of them go to service, right? Based upon their performance in the school. And then within 3 months, a couple more will be gone. And, 1 year later, out of the 15, hopefully you've still retained 10 of them, but probably more likely 7 or 8 of them. And that's what you have to do. You have to overhire, right? Because there's going to be attrition. Somebody's going to have to move away to take care of grandma. Somebody's going to change their mind and not like the accountability or the sales slant with being a service technician. You just have to prepare for that. So you overhire knowing that a year from now, it's going to mean that you're going to increase your manpower by 7. So.
Gotcha. Do you guys have a cost to acquire one of those techs, like, do you guys pay for the schooling, or is it like, hey, you know, pay X to get a training in this, or like, how do you guys structure that whole thing? Who pays for it? And like,
Sure.
how does that break
Um,
down?
if you go to a trade school in Southern California, it's going to cost you between $17,000 and $22,000, right? And most of the trade schools here are 10 months. So we've flipped it on its head. We are paying them to work for us as opposed to them paying the trade school. And that's why we have, such demand for what we do here. But we pay them. And the beauty of this is that when you go to the trade school, you go to, the building and you're there every day for these 10 months and you're working on, maybe they got 10 or 12 working systems inside of a mechanical room that you're going to put your leads on, and you're going to go ahead and charge a system and learn the mechanics, the mechanical part of the job. But when you're here, not only are you in classroom time, but we can do 2 days of classroom this week. And then on Wednesday, we can put you on the roof of this building where I've got 15 systems and they could do work there. And then Thursday and Friday, I can send you out with our technicians to people's actual houses so that they can see what working systems are like and the different applications that we have here in Southern California. So it's a more well-rounded education. And because of that, we're able to do it in a more condensed time period than the 10 months that it takes them in the trade schools.
Yeah, the real world in a customer's house experience, I'm sure, is valuable for them, and also kind of like, I'd imagine, helps shake off the jitters or whatever, where it's like, if you're only doing everything in a classroom environment, the first time you get sent to, a dispatch, you're going to be like, oh my God, this is the real, the first time you're actually doing it for real with a paying customer, you're in someone's home. It's like, if that's the first time you're tasting that, then I'm sure it's like, like anything, it takes a little getting used to, build your confidence back up with that. But if you've been doing that while still in training, it's like that transition is way.
So we're just graduating this class, and I walked through the parking lot this morning, and they got their trucks, right? So today they spent washing their trucks. They're starting to load it with, the parts that they need to be able to go out and run calls. But at this point, 3 months in, they're a part of the operation. They know everybody, right? And everybody knows them. And they've been on calls. They're in our service Titan. They're a part of the operation. So it's not like walking in here as a stranger. They've already been embraced, and everyone's excited for them to get out there and to show everybody what they've got. So it's been a great thing for us to be able to, grow our own. It's our own farm system, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say, how do you think it impacts the retention, but also the efficiency on the service calls? Having basically a clean slate come into your system where you're training them your way, your processes, your sales, everything, like every step of the whole deal is done your way from the beginning, versus, I mean, I've talked to dozens of other business owners where they're like, yeah, dude, the older techs that get hired and they've like, I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's like, you have to like retrain them. They have their own way of doing things. It's like sometimes a little bit more difficult, where it's like, dude, we just kind of want it done this way, and getting the experienced techs are great, because you can kind of plug them in and they know what should be done, most of them at least. But sometimes there's a little bit of friction where it's like the old way of doing things versus your way. And so do you guys feel like there's a benefit or advantage where it's like you have your own fresh pipeline of people that are just coming in, and like you said, by the time they graduate, they've already been in the system, so it's like they know the drill by the time they're actually like,
It,
full-time
it's
employees?
it's a it's a very intentional process for us to have taken these people off the streets and teach them our way. I'm really not interested in hiring people from other operations, right? Who are going to come in and they've got a different way of doing things and their way is better and they're not going to conform to your rules. And it's just, you've started off a bad relationship like that, right? But if we can hire somebody and train them from the ground up, they're yours and they're always going to do it your way. So it's just a better business model for us. It's worked out for us. And not to say that we don't hire people that have worked at other shops. We do. But I've noticed that the ones that we raise up, through our own school, they're more likely to, the retention piece that you mentioned, they want to stay, right? This has been their only experience in the industry. And honestly, you leave here, you'd be hard pressed to find another experience like this in Los Angeles. Like it just doesn't exist. So, I think that it allows us to continue to grow the manpower with the kinds of people that we want, in the field. Then those are ones that we've taught ourselves. So,
What has to be true in order to build out an entire school in a system like that?
um, it was something that when we started this with this business and bought it, I knew that our quickest way to grow it and scale it was to recruit trade school students from the trade schools, because that's the bare minimum that we can accept, right? I can't, at that time, we didn't have our own school. I couldn't bring somebody in off the street and teach them. It wasn't, we didn't have the manpower to do that. So the first order of business, okay, let's make some relationships with trade schools. Let's try to get to the point where we are their first option when they're going to graduate 20 people. We want to get their very best people, right? And so I spent a lot of time speaking at trade schools, sitting on their boards, helping them with their curriculums, just so that I had first shot at their best employees. And that was really our first, the incarnation of the whole thing. So all of a sudden we go from 34 to 50 to 60 people, 70 people, and it becomes, okay, if we can just cut the trade school out of this whole thing and be our own trade school, then we don't have to wait and we're not at their mercy. Because what happens if the trade schools don't graduate a bunch of top quality communicators this cycle? We're still waiting. We're going to hire A players here. So we just decided, hey, let's just do it ourselves. And that way we weren't at their mercy and we could hire the kind of people that we wanted to hire.
What metric does that become even viable, whether it be revenue, head count? Like how do you know when you're at a size that can even support something like that? Or like if you can recall the exact moment when you were like, what if we could just count the trade school out of this? What was going on in the company right then? What size? What were some of the problems? What were some of the things going on where it's like, if there was someone else watching this that's in that exact position, they would know that this is the next best move that they could make,
We
or they
were
would have the
probably
resources to do it. And it's like, that's what they should and could do.
Sure. We were probably between 60 and 80 employees when I decided to do that. And, uh, you know, the ability to do that was pretty much because I stole the guy who was in charge of all of the trainers for the big trade school here in town. And I'd been courting him for over a year. And, he finally got to the point where he was ready to do it. So I brought him over. And so the timing wasn't to get to a certain headcount in the business. It was just sort of waiting for that guy to say, yes, I'm willing to leave this job that I've had for a long time where I'm in charge of all these trainers and I'm willing to go with you to do something different. So he trusted me. I'm very grateful for him. And when we're on a down cycle, when we don't have a new class, he goes out there and he rides along and supports the new students. He goes with them in the field, and that's what he'll be doing next week. These guys are going to be released on their own, and he will be riding along with them, making sure that they're okay, making sure that their sequence of operations and their refrigerant cycle and all of that stuff, they're following it to how he taught them. But I think that, there wasn't a certain head count that we got to. It was just, I knew that it was time. And I also realized that the trade schools, they hadn't been providing the kind of people on our schedule that we needed. So we had to do something and take it into our own hands. And, very grateful that we were able to do that.
If you were me and you wanted to buy an HVAC business, what would you be looking for as far as like the revenue number, head count, and location? Like, what's the sweet spot to come in, buy it, make the right changes with the idea of either continuing to run it and grow it, or, you know, long term, maybe an exit or something like that?
Well, um, you have to be able to afford it, number one, right? You have to be capitalized enough to be able to buy a business and to, have the in this economy, to have the cash to be sustainable and to be able to throw money where you have to throw it to grow it, and some people do that with partnerships. Some people, there's just a lot of ways to get there, but I think for most people who are interested in dipping their toe in the pool and buying a service business, um, you have to believe in yourself that you can take a small business and grow it, right? Not a lot of people are going to be, walking into a situation where they can spend $5 million to buy an existing heating and air conditioning company, right? Most of the people that are listening to this podcast will, if they can round up some money, they're going to be able to round up, $1 million or $2 million or less to be able to buy a business. And that's going to limit what you can buy, right? So you have to work with a broker. You have to work with somebody that can help to identify businesses that aren't just for sale, but that would make sense to buy. A lot of these small businesses, guys get tired, they get 60 years old and they want out. And, they've got 7 employees and they've been doing this their whole lives. And it's been a cash flow business for them where they're living their whole lives out of it. And all of a sudden they want to sell the business to you, but they've been doing all the selling themselves, right? Like there's no sales. You're buying a database. So, you have to be working with people that can advise you on what makes sense, the kinds of businesses that you should buy. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And what we've done here, this comeback story that we've authored here, it's not typical. It's not normal, right? And it's required 5.5 years of my boots on the ground here, um, to and a lot of really smart people that I've been able to hire here, um, and all of us to put this together and for it to be the success story that it is. So it starts with one person, right? You buy a business yourself, and then you have to find experts and people who will help you to refine your call center and help you with marketing and recruit people for you and help to train them so that they go out and give great customer service, and great salespeople who can go in and close deals at the right margins to make sure that you're profitable. And there's so much that goes into it, right? So my best advice to anybody who's thinking about buying an existing home services business and then they're going to take it and scale it and grow it, you need to talk to a lot of people, and people who have done it before, people who understand the heartache and the nightmare that it can become sometimes, because it can drain you. I have so many people that come to us wanting to sell us their business, and half of these folks are upside down and they wish they would have never done it, right? I can think of 2 of them, one in Orange County, one in the Inland Empire. And the Orange County people, they're smart people, but they're upside down. And the one in the Inland Empire, he had so much debt, he's just dying to get out of it, right? Wrapped trucks and did all this stuff. And it's not easy, right? Not everybody can figure out how to make this happen. So you can really ruin your life by making the wrong decision or a bad decision. So it requires a lot of deliberate thought and talking to a lot of people.
Gotcha. Out of the 2 that you just thought of right away, obviously those are like fresh in your mind because they're either people that you're closer to, or it's a not extreme situation, but like you're like, okay, yeah, this is a sinking ship. What are the things that like went wrong? Or if you were looking at a deal or looking at a situation of someone that had bought it, tried their best, like what are the things that go wrong that are like the worst things that could, like worst case scenario things that could happen? Or if you're looking at a deal to buy one, like what are the biggest red flags of like, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole? Like biggest turnoffs when looking at potential business to buy.
Well, when we're going to give somebody a multiple on what their business is worth, it's really just based upon their EBITDA, right? We want to know that they have been a profitable cash flowing business. We would be interested in that. I'm not interested in a company that's upside down, and I don't want to save. I don't, I can't be that guy right now at this point in my life. Um, because it takes just a mammoth effort to unwind that. And there's a reason they want out, is they've just ruined the business and they ruined their lives in the same, so um it's all their financials, and a lot of these small businesses, they barely have financials, and they'll never be sold. I know somebody here in this marketplace, and he would like to sell his business, and he's done the accounting himself, right? And that's tough. You're not going to get private equity to look at those balance sheets and to make a commitment and say, hey, here's $3 million for your business. They're just not going to do it. So you have to have great financials. And if you're a small contractor listening to this and you haven't done that, you need someone um, to run your books and to close your financials monthly, and to, organize what you have going on. And you'll start to see whether you have a profitable business or something that is, going to be worthwhile to sell to somebody. But private equity doesn't want to buy businesses that don't have financials or that are upside down. They're not here to save anybody, right? A sinking ship. It's not happening. So,
Hmm. Have there been any creative or unorthodox ways that you've seen people get capitalized to buy a business, whether it be partners, banks, or, seller financing terms, just like someone that is scrappy and wants to get their foot in the door somehow? Like, have you seen any of those situations work out, or any that you can recall that were like, huh, that's an interesting way to go about doing that?
um, I've seen some people somehow be gifted businesses. I did have somebody come to me. Um, I've had a few actually come to me that have said, "Hey, I'll give you half the business. Just help me fix it." Right? Um, but I've got to fix it, right? It's on me. They don't know what to do, so they'll, and that exists out there, right? Like, if you are in this industry and you are smart and you have, authored your own comeback story, or you have done good things and you understand how to make a business a success, there are a lot of people out there that will give you half of their business for you to go in and to fix it. So that's probably the most creative financing I can think of, right? No money down. Um, and then it's up to you. If you're the guy that can fix it, it's up to you to figure out how to, put together a deal with that person so that, um, that all of that's airtight for you. But no, I mean, I think if you're just a guy off the street, you have to be able to figure out access to funds and or partnerships so that you can, be on something like, like a business in home services. Um, but a lot of people started from scratch, and they grow it for 5 or 6 years, and they grow it to a point where they can get a few $1 million for it. And you see it all the time, right? You see it all the time. And some people just use the business as a bank account, right? They just run their whole life through the business, and they'll never get out of it because, they're taking $500,000 a year out of the business, and they think, oh gosh, if I sell the business, how am I going to be able to replace that? That $500,000 a year. It's real tough if you become accustomed to that. So it's tough to get started if you don't have access to people or capital. You've got to be able to have one or the other, because people can direct you to capital, right? Unless you have access to capital. But you've got to have some kind of access, right? You've got to bring something to the table. So,
Sure. Obviously, it could be a little different with every deal, every situation, every business, every person. But is there a sweet spot that you've noticed where more likely than not, it's more so a business that is set up to be bought and operated, not like you're buying a job? Like you said, a lot of the the fix and flips, if you will, is going to require the mammoth boots on the ground. Like, you are basically signing up for a full-time job at that point, to be very much in the weeds. Is there anything that you've seen as far as like, roughly this is the revenue range, or this is the size of business, where like we're looking at it and we know that this is typically around the point in time where they've, got their shit together, so to speak, where it's like we could come in and just like make it a smoother transition, and like this is what we're looking for as the sweet spot where we want this, we can take this and see the potential to grow it.
The expression, even the best laid plans go to waste. It would be easy to look at any of the businesses in our portfolio and say, hey, that business did 7 million last year. We can get 10 million out of it this year, 12 million the next year, whatever. But it's all the math that's on paper. And at the end of the day, once you're in the seat and once you're operating the business, the whole boots on the ground thing, that you can't deny that. All the businesses that we have purchased, I have gone in on day one and spent 3 months as the general manager of each of these businesses so that I could recruit a leader, hire a general manager, understand the processes and the procedures, and change the people, change the processes, do whatever was necessary. And so, you might have these great plans, but until you really get into the seat and you're part of the day-to-day, do you realize this is going to be tougher than I thought? Or, hey, the people that we have here are way more talented than we had any idea. We're going to be able to get this done quicker than we thought. It all becomes real apparent once you're actually, in the business, right? So you can have a business plan and model it so that you can scale it, to double revenue in the first 3 years. But once you get inside the door, sometimes that story can change, right? It can become a much tougher task, or sometimes a little easier. But not until you're behind the desk will you really, really, really know.
Gotcha. What are the first things that you look to tweak or change when you do acquire a business?
Well, it seems like the very first thing that always comes up is, how long do you want the owner to stay, right? And we've been in a situation where the previous owners have wanted to hang around, and I don't want them there. For me, like, they can stay for a week and then they're out of the building. And the reason is you're trying to make sure that the existing employees understand that there's new leadership. We're going to be doing things differently. And that's the hard part for the new owners to see is, hey, we're going to change everything that we used to do here, right? There's going to be different processes. Your uniforms might look different. We're going to do dispatching different. And the old ownership, their heart is being broken every day as they see how much you're changing the business. And I can't have it. So I've always kicked old ownership out after a few days, let them hang around, talk about transfer of bank accounts and, hey, what's the story on this? And what's the story on this person? And that's the end of the transition. It can't exist more than 3 or 4 days for me. I need them out, and I need them to understand that things are going to be different. Things are going to be changing. And it's hard to do that when you've got the old leader and the new leader sitting side by side, So that's always the biggest thing for me, is just to make sure that the old ownership is gone very quickly so that we can, start to make our changes.
What's next on the chopping block after that? Whether it's a person or a process, like, what are you looking at as far as, the things that we know we need to fix first to get this moving in the right direction?
In our case, it was all the processes. We bought old businesses, and these old businesses, there were no processes, right? Everybody was doing what they wanted, how they wanted, when they wanted. And that's not a recipe for success, right? You have to have a very organized and structured approach. And when we came into this business, Brody Pennell, I had to stand in front of 34 people and say, I just need you to trust me, right? It's going to look a lot different, and I'm going to ask you to do things that you haven't done before. But I promise you that the end result will be that everybody's going to make more money. Everybody's going to have a greater path to success in their career. And, it's 5.5 years later. And I know that the ones who remain from those original 34, they could, they would stand here and say, you were 100% true when you stood in front of us that first time, you know? And that's really where it starts for me. Is just, you have to start to put the processes in where they didn't exist, and you have to be an agent of change. And that's what I've tried to be for these businesses, is to go in and show people the incredible things that can happen if there is accountability, if there are processes in place, if there is structure. And when you have all that stuff in place, you start to achieve incredible things, and you celebrate it, right? You celebrate the wins that you get along the way. And, you have your first $1 million month or your first whatever, and you start to celebrate, and the people start to believe that, wow, we've become a different company, and look at the uniform, and look at the trucks, and look at the building, and it's all different. Right. So, just, it's people and processes, really, at the end of the day.
Gotcha. What are the things that are standardized for each of those roles, whether it be a person, process, when you just did the acquisition, making all those big changes that you talked about? What are the things that stay the same for every business that you guys are involved with? And what are the things that maybe change a little bit based off of the circumstance or what condition things were in when you got there?
Everything changes. In any of these businesses, the places are unrecognizable. Everything has changed except for the employees and the long-term employees that have stayed, but there's nothing that's remained. These were all businesses that had ownerships that were older folks who never had the marketing support or the knowledge to grow the business, who never had the recruiting or training experience that would further the lives and the careers of their employees. Never had, they didn't have support. They didn't know where to go. And that's why they were stuck doing 3 million a year, right? They weren't growing, and they hadn't grown for years, and they were just stuck doing 2 million or 3 million a year. And, those businesses are now doing more than 10 million a year. And it was because we brought in additional people. We trained everybody. We, just changed everything from day one. And I think that it's been a good recipe for us, for all of these businesses, to go in and just wholesale changes. We kept the people, right? Like, that's the one thing that I think separates us from the private equity firms here that have come into Southern California. A lot of those funds, they change out the people. We're not interested in changing the people. We want to keep the people. But we sure do want them to do things differently and do it our way. And so that's what we've done.
Gotcha. Do you guys do anything with subscriptions?
We have memberships
Right.
in all the locations, and those memberships help to sustain us. I talked earlier about our outbounding efforts for the call center, and those members, they're critical, especially at the times of the years when the phone's not ringing. You got to be able to lean upon them and call them and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, you've already paid for your membership. It's time for your air conditioning tune-up. We're going to send Johnny out there tomorrow. And without that, you're hurting at this time of the year, or you're buying $350 calls, right? So the memberships are critical, a critical step. And when we got here to Brody, they weren't selling them. They were losing them. And I stood in front of everybody and I said, I don't know if you guys know it, but we're going out of business here because no one's selling memberships, and we're not renewing the ones that we have. So, the memberships it's ground zero, right? In order to be a success, you have to have repeat customers.
For sure. Can you break down a little bit like what your subscription model looks like? Maybe if you guys have like different tiers or the pricing or what's included, and then like,
Very simple. It's very simple. It's 2 visits a year for if it's an air conditioning only business, and 3 visits a year if they have plumbing, right? So there's 1 visit for heating, 1 visit for air conditioning, and 1 visit for plumbing. And and there's no tiers, right? I think the simpler the better, right? And I'm not, I've seen a lot of complicated um, programs, and I wasn't interested in having a complicated one. So I think that the simpler the better for your customer. There's less for them to think about. Hey, yeah, that does make sense for you guys to come out here twice for air, once for heating, one for air conditioning, and once for plumbing. I'd like to have you guys back because, son, you did a great job in here today. And I'm excited to tell my brother about the great job that you did. And I'm looking forward to having you back next year. Right. So yeah, a simple membership is I think the best.
Gotcha. Can you say the price point? You don't have to if you don't want to, but just out of
Sure.
curiosity.
Yeah. Ours is the ones that are 2 visits are $270, and the 3 visit is $320. And I think for this city, that's the sweet spot. So in this marketplace, I think that we're probably right in the middle of what most of the other larger players do.
Right.
So
And you guys just bill that monthly?
we do. We bill it monthly, and you want that recurring revenue, right? You want that credit card because it's valuable to know that there's one day a month that you're going to be able to push the button and all this recurring revenue is going to come through. So it's nice to have that predictability.
Percent. What is the most underrated person in the org chart that most guys hire too late or don't prioritize enough that could make a huge impact on their business?
Good question. Well, for this business, I think that, it's about managing people and personalities, right? And getting the most that you can out of them. And so your middle layer of management is really important. You have to surround yourself with great people who will hold folks accountable. So, I mean, for me, it's really hard for me to pick one of my managers over the other, but I have a service manager, an installation manager, a sales manager. I've got just, call center manager, all of these people, but really it's that whole team, right? Nobody's more important than the other in the whole scheme of things. If they are leading their group of people and holding them accountable, they are doing their job, and it will help to lead us to success. But I wouldn't say any of them is more important than the other.
If you could go back and like rewind your entire career and like be vulnerable for a second, what's like the biggest mistake that you think you made and how could you have avoided it?
I was too emotional. Um, I I think that had I just, and this is many years later, right? I've been doing this for a really long time, and I'm one of the old guys. I'm a fossil, right? Um, but I think when I was younger, I was just an extreme control freak, and I had sort of made a career out of turnaround stories, right? When I was younger. And then I got to the big shop, right? I got to the big show, when you make it to the major leagues from the minor leagues. And I had a chance to join Service Champions as the general manager. And I think that when you join a business that is already on a path to success, and you're so used to doing it all yourself in smaller businesses, and you get there and you still want to do everything yourself, it's a problem, right? You have to be able to recruit people in and trust that they will do their jobs. And I don't think I did that. I think that I became very emotional about it. And so if I could rewind the hands of time, I would have taken some of the emotion out of it. I'm able to do that now, but the job is different for me now, right? I have a lot of managers and I'm sort of flying at 30,000 feet, looking at the whole operation. But back then I wasn't flying at 30,000 feet. I was doing all the work myself. And I just think I could have been, I could have been a little less harsh, and I could have been a little more patient. And I think I've learned those things over the years.
Hmm. So, with everything that you know, all the experience that you have, what's the one question that I didn't ask but should have that you're like, I have a strong opinion on this, or like, this is a game changer. Everyone needs to know this?
Um, I think the question that everybody asks these days is about private equity, right? And what does private equity mean to our industry, and how is it affecting it and changing it? And is it a bad thing or is it a good thing? And because it's certainly changed our industry, you know, um, our businesses, we are not owned by private equity. There's just three of us that own these businesses together. And I think, and I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but I don't think private equity is ruining our industry at all. I think that there are many, and this is from my personal experience, because I have a lot of small contractors who come up to me and they want to sell their business. They want out. They want an avenue to get out and to make a little money on the way out, and to, reap the rewards of all the hard work they put in. And PE is offering that chance. And when PE gets in the door with a $2 million business, their job is to go ahead and enhance the value and increase the revenue. And they're going to start with the P&L. And they're going to mark up that P&L and say, hey, we need to make all of these moves in order to make this a profitable entity for us and to get on the right path. And if you're going to sell your business to PE, you have to be prepared for that to happen. And you have to be prepared that they're going to let some people go, that they're going to put a business school student in charge. And that business school student, he doesn't come from our industry. He doesn't know it. He's treating this business as an investment. That is what you're getting into bed with. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that some of these small businesses, they wouldn't be viable if, Mr. Jones that owned it before, who just retired after 40 years and sold it to PE, what would become of that business without him? It's not going to be viable. And I think that if PE chooses to invest in it and to try to keep it viable and to try to grow it, I think it's great. I think it's great that a 40-year-old business can continue to stick around and have a chance at a second life. So I don't think private equity is a bad word. I don't think that they're destroying our industry. But I have seen them come into Southern California and buy a bunch of brands and not be successful and have to consolidate their holdings because of the mistakes that they're making. They have to learn. But I don't, by any stretch of the imagination, think that private equity is ruining our industry. I think that there's a lot of good being done there. But PE has come into a market like Southern California where they're not very experienced and they're making mistakes. So, but yeah, I think that private equity, there's a place for what they're doing for many guys that have worked for a really long time and are looking for an exit and a way out of their business. And so that's my take on how private equity is affecting our industry right now.
Sure. I think you're right where it provides the off ramp for a lot of guys that would have never had the opportunity to do that without them being interested in that type of business. How does what private equity is doing change for the guys that are just getting started, though?
Well, I think that, anybody who's just getting started, and people are seeing what's happening, right? People are seeing that plumbers and air conditioning people, that they're retiring and selling their business for millions of dollars, right? And it's raising the eyebrows of a lot of people wanting to get into the trades now, because they have those same dreams, right? They read about this. They read about service champions getting, 21x, or, these multiples that are being paid. And they have to realize that they're never going to get to that point, right? Just to stay open and to stay alive in our industry in a city like this, and to be a business that can last for 2 or 3 or 5 years, to grow a service base, to grow your revenue, to be profitable. Like, if you can do that, you've won the battle. And if at that point you're at a, you're you're able to talk to some people about an exit, congratulations to you. You've beaten the odds, because most of these little contractors here in Southern California, they fail and they're out of business. And those people go to work for other companies, right? I get lots of people who had their own company and they closed it up and they go to work somewhere because they have to be able to pay their bills. It's tough to make it. It's tough to make it but you have to, if you're going to make that jump and try to dip your toe in that pool, you have to surround yourself with good people, make good relationships. You have to partner with smart people in order to make it a success, because, these turnaround stories, they're infrequent. You've got guys, and I spoke of a couple of them earlier in Middle America, and I was thinking of Chad Peterman and Chris Hoffman, and these are young men that have made an incredible success of themselves and their businesses, and I'm jealous as heck of what they've been able to do. Doing $200 and $300 million and just scaling and growing these businesses. But these are really smart young guys who have incredible teams around them. That's how smart they are. They just hire great people, and you get a lot of great smart minds in one room, and unbelievable stuff happens. That's how we built Service Champions, right? It wasn't because of we had a great field staff, but the managers, like the collection of talent that we had, that was the catalyst to growing that business, right? And now, I don't know, 120, $130 million in one location. But that's not normal though, right? For the people that are out there driving a truck and they're doing $1 million or $1.5 million, and it's their livelihood and it's everything they have is wrapped up in it. It's a difficult thing to try to figure out a way out of that. And a lot of times PE is not interested in buying a $1 million business where the owner is the salesman and the lead installer, right? That's not what they're looking for. So.
Gotcha. Do you think that private equity being involved, especially if you're going to try to start in the same market that they have some kind of presence in, raises the bar of the quality of operator it takes to even like get things off the ground and, have a chance of keeping a business longer than a year, a couple months, whatever? Or is there still room for like the mom and pop, chuck in a truck, just happy to put some food on the table and whatever's, not like concerned about growing some huge thing, whatever?
In Los Angeles here, when I drive down the street, you drive down the street in the evenings and you see food trucks and you see these people set up their tables and their tents. And this is a really big city for that, right? These, the side of the road, they're just cooking meat and cooking tacos, and it's everywhere. It's all over the streets here in Los Angeles. And those are hustlers. Those are people that either have a day job or it's a family business, and somebody, like, it's all up and down the street here behind, where our business is. And it's just, these are people that want it, right? And, it's the same thing for our industry, right? There are certain people out there. I have technicians here that work for me that they want to open their own business at some point, and they will. And I'm sure that they will be successful because they're organized. They're very detail oriented. They track their numbers. They're interested in their performance. Not everybody's like that. Some of these guys, they're not self-starters. They're not driven like that. So the people who are, those kinds of folks who are the self-starters, the ones who want to achieve something more in their lives, they'll make it happen for themselves. The world is full of all kinds. And, if you have that extra little bit of fire in you, you can do some incredible things in this world.
If you could leave one last piece of advice for someone that wants to be successful in the HVAC world, what would it be?
Be humble, and understand that there's no replacement for hard work. There's no shortcuts, right? Anybody who ever made a success of themselves in our industry had to do it through hard work. And if you look around our industry at all the titans, the guys who sold their businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars, or who are running businesses that have hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, they all worked really hard and probably outworked everybody at some point. That's what it takes, right? You have to be prepared. Your family has to be prepared that you're going to have, the first 2 years of owning this business, I didn't get to see my wife. Like, we talk about this all the time. She made this sacrifice. I came home, played with the kids. We ate dinner. We put them to sleep. I went to my office. She went to the bedroom or watched TV or whatever, and she didn't see me. But we went from 6 million in revenue to 30 million in revenue really quick. And I'm indebted to her for giving me the time to work on the business. She knew that that was a sacrifice that had to be made, and she did it. And, someday I'll repay her, but I'm grateful, but there's no substitute for the hard work. You have to put it in.
Yeah, there's no free lunch. Right on. To round things out, if our next guest, assuming that they're like an operator at a similar, level that you're at, what's a question that you would want to ask them?
Well, good question. I try to be a student of the game, and, I'm always interested in how people are doing things in their businesses. I'm always interested in their pricing. I'm interested in their processes. Um, I think that if somebody was the same size as us, I'd probably be asking, what's your next step, right? How are you going to get yourself from, whatever million you are? What does your next $5 or $10 million look like, right? Because that's a tough thing. Sometimes you get to a certain point, and to get to that next level, it requires doing things differently, right? That old saying, if you, I don't even know what the saying is, but the whole point is that if you always do it the same way that you've always done it, it's not necessarily going to get you to that next step, right?
Yeah.
So I would probably ask somebody, what are they doing to get to their next step?
Gotcha.
Because you can be stuck on a number for a long time, and something different's got to change to ratchet you up. So maybe you can ask the next person that question.
Definitely will. Definitely will, for sure. Well, Lawrence, I'm out of questions, man. It's been a pleasure. A lot of really valuable conversations and topics, got discussed. So where can people find you at? And we'll put links in the description down below for anyone that wants to either get in touch, or if there's any links or social media stuff you wanna shout out there. We'll definitely make sure.
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn, right? And it's Lawrence Castillo, and you can put that at the bottom. But that's the best way to find me. And, I have a lot of contractors that reach out, and sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get back to you, but I will get back to you, and always willing to answer questions. And, somebody wants to come by for a shop tour, come on by, and we'll show you what we do, and willing to share it all.
Cool. Appreciate you coming on, man. That was awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope the contractors listening to this get something out of it. That's the whole idea and the whole point.
Yes, sir.